So you've either come here because you like fun, or you like Beverly Hills Cop, or you like both, and you're wondering if it's still possible, after 40 years, that you could have both rolled up into one. "1984 Beverly Hills Cop." It's about a freewheeling Detroit cop pursuing a murder investigation of his friend who got involved with a crime family in California. And he finds himself dealing with the very different culture of Beverly Hills. All right, so let's do something really fun. I'm going to read you an excerpt from a review in 1984 by Kirk Ellis of The Hollywood Reporter. "The movie's greatest pleasures arise from watching Murphy bluff his way into and out of various compromising situations, assuming a variety of fake identities with an uproarious, reckless abandon. The characters of Taggart and Rosenbaum are also classic modern-day versions of Laurel and Hardy." Totally agree. It's one of the things that makes this movie fantastic, is that it's just fun, and Eddie Murphy is obviously a huge part of that. At various times he does dip into those fake characters, pretending to be someone else, these fake identities, and to get in and out of situations. And it reminds me of, now this came later in 1985, so they were probably filming close to the same time, so I don't think there's any intentional similarity there. But Fletch comes out in 1985, and Fletch is all about those fake identities. The difference being that he has costumes and all that. But that's what it kind of reminds me of. But in this movie, Eddie pulls everything off with so much charm and just comedic brilliance. This is easily one of my top 10 or 15 movies of all time. It's so much fun. If you haven't seen it in a while, it holds up. There's so many reasons why it's great. Eddie Murphy is obviously a huge part of it, but it's the characters, the other characters, that pull their own weight and elevate this whole thing together. It's almost like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Eddie Murphy being the tide that's coming in and lifting everything. You've got John Ashton and Judge Reinhold, Taggart and Rosewood. They're a great team, like the Laurel and Hardy. You got Ronnie Cox doing Lieutenant Bergamel, Lisa Eilbacher playing Jenny Summers. But I think that Taggart and Rosenbaum are my favorite, and they're like this kind of sweet California couple almost. Taggart's kind of the grumpy one, and Rosenbaum's like the sweet, innocent cop. I don't know which one is Laurel and which one is Hardy, but the smaller one that's kind of gentle. There are things like the scene where they're in the car doing a stakeout, and Rosenbaum is reading. Seems very California to me, especially in 1980s, where he's reading a magazine and he tells Taggart, the grumpy one, they say that by age 48, every American has about 5 pounds of undigested red meat in their colon. And Taggart's like, would you think I have any interest in hearing this? And Rosenbaum's like, well, you eat a lot of red meat, and you drink a lot of coffee, and you're stressed. They're like an old couple, and it just works, right? That's part of the charm of it. These characters work. They fit so well to the people playing them. It makes everything just so much better. And really, the rising tide of Axel Foley is what brings everything together. He just makes everyone feel compelled to push themselves, to enjoy life. And in the words of actor Paul Ross, which I think sums the whole movie up, he mentioned this in one of his podcasts, that the likable thing about Eddie is that he's like almost like a smile virus, pulling people into these better, more likable versions of themselves. And it's like you can feel you as the watcher and the characters in there saying to themselves, boy, this Axel Foley, I just love him. It makes me feel alive. So there's another excerpt from that same review in 1984 by Kirk Ellis that I think is important to bring up, because it does touch on a couple of things that I think actually make the movie better, even though he sees them as kind of not great things. He says that while the grittiness of the realism in the opening scene works, it fails at the end with Scarface-esque attempt. I gotta tell you, I disagree. I see what he's saying about the Scarface ending, and I'm not sure what year Scarface came in, so I don't know if it had an influence on this or not, but I don't know what the timeline is, but I think it works. And one of the reasons that I say that, besides the fact that it's just fun and it's well done, is that if you look at Bronson Pinchot's scene, you could make the argument that that doesn't work either, from the standpoint of it doesn't really advance the story. You could take it out and it's not going to cause any big problems in the progression of the story. but it's fun and it's necessary. And if you took those scenes out, he's so funny, so brilliant with his character in those scenes that it would be a different movie. So I think he's right that there are a couple of things that happen in the movie maybe could have been taken out or altered, and it might have helped the timeline in some weird perspective. But you can't mess with the perfection of this movie because I think those things go into what makes it great and fun. Just a couple of fun facts that I found out, and this one comes from IMDb, so I don't know how reliable IMDb is. I'm not trying to say that it's a trusted news source, but they say on there that a lot of the comedic lines by John Ashton, Judge Reinhold, and Eddie Murphy, Axel Foley, Taggart, and Rosenbaum, they were improvised. And there were actually hundreds of takes that were thrown out because the three of them kept cracking each other up during filming, which just tells you that they're having a good time, and it comes through the screen. The other thing is that as someone from Michigan and has lived in Detroit and Metro Detroit, the opening scene really paints what feels like an accurate portrayal of Detroit. And it's a lot of emotions or thoughts go through there that don't have anything to do with Beverly Hills Cop, but it's overall, it's a fun scene when you have Axel hanging by a chain from the back of the cigarette truck. He's undercover, right? The Detroit cops are chasing him. They don't know that he's a cop. He's just got busted in some deal. And they're just literally driving through Detroit neighborhoods, smashing up cars. And there's destruction behind it, like abandoned houses and burnt out buildings and stuff. And it just makes, for me, it's fun, but it also makes me think, every time I watch it, I always think, boy, Detroit in the 80s, like, was that going on all the time? Or like, did they clean that up? Or it leads me to my last fun fact, which is Gil Hill, who's Inspector Todd, Axel Foley's boss in Detroit, was actually a Detroit cop. He was in Detroit. I don't know if he was an actor, if he did anything else, but he was great in this. And there are some allegations by people in a documentary that he, like a lot of Detroit politicians, took bribes and did some shady stuff. But in this movie, he's great. He's lovable, he's foul-mouthed, really helps paint the picture of Detroit. And I think the great thing about that is it does really set up, even though they do make comments about Beverly Hills and maybe some of the unflattering things about that culture, it really kind of, for me at least, sets up the differences between Detroit and California and kind of keeps that free-flowing, smiling California dream alive, especially told through the lens of the great Eddie Murphy.